Grayson Grundhoefer's trying to get away for the weekend. No, actually, we are. We won't be here tomorrow. And Grayson, I asked him if he'd come on a day early, and then, of course, we'll have him back to the regular rotation of Fridays for the next how many weeks, months, years. Grayson, thanks for your time. You were at practice. Craig was at practice. A lot of people have been at practice. It's kind of right in the middle of our wheelhouse of when we host the show. But your thoughts about anything in particular that came out of that caught your attention, or anything right now with the team that's caught your attention?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first place to start is probably wide receiver. And I know we've talked about this position, it feels like ad nauseum at this point, but the more that I look at this group and the more that I kind of look at the injuries they've been having to deal with, and just, I mean, guys, it's kind of alarming. And I know they have talent in the room, and I know they have, really good young pieces, but they've been dealing with the injury bug a little bit. And now they're just trying to get healthy. But the more I look at it, the more I think I do believe they're going to try to get someone from the transfer portal to come in and create a little more stability there, give them an older guy, especially on the outside. And so, I don't know. I think the more I watch it, the more I look at it, the more I think it just makes too much sense for this team to try to go out and get another reliable weapon. And that's not to say that the talent on the roster isn't really good. I just think it's so unproven that it just would be kind of shocking to me if they go into the season just relying on all of these young guys, because it's not something really Baylor has ever done, at least in my time covering them.
Is there someone that you've looked at, a veteran in the transfer portal? I mean, it's hard to keep track of, but is there a Drew Estrada? Is that what we're maybe thinking about, someone like that caliber?
See, that's a really good question, because I think if there was a Drew Estrada, that would probably be a really good fit for Baylor this year. But I also could see them taking a risk on maybe a guy that, hasn't played a ton at a previous stop. And yeah, you're sitting there and going, well, it's the same problem, right? You got unproven production, but I just think, adding as much talent as possible could be an option, or trying to find someone, like you mentioned, like a Drew Estrada, who has proven production, just maybe not at, the Power 5 level. So there's really no one in the portal right now that is standing out to me too much. And it's one of those situations where we saw how quickly they offered Josh White. We saw how quickly they've, pursued options in the portal once those guys become available. And we've also seen guys enter the portal and Baylor not react at all. So I think kind of what I'm looking at when guys, enter the portal and Baylor actually does have interest, you're going to see them be far more aggressive than they have been. So right now, I think they're still kind of evaluating. And I would say, the guy that they might end up taking, or the guy they may end up looking at, might be someone who's not even in the portal yet.
Grayson, we were talking about the Football Power Index from ESPN just a few minutes ago, and it's not an exact science. It's a predictor. It's a computer model and all of that. Baylor was at, 19?
Yes.
19. So if Baylor was at 19 in the preseason top 25 poll, what would your reaction be to that? Too high, too low, what?
Honestly, I think that's right about perfect.
Yeah.
And I know some people might be, upset with that answer, defending Big 12 champs, they return all this production. But, I will say, I think there's still more to prove from this Baylor team. And I do think they're replacing a lot of key parts. And so I think that's a pretty fair ranking. Now, for me, they'd probably be inside the top 15. I do think that they have that kind of ceiling. They have that pedigree with the addition. But I think with all the question marks and, kind of that national media perception as well, I think top 20 is plenty fair at this point.
Yeah, and I want to go back to what you were mentioning about the wide receivers. Craig mentioned who was there, who wasn't there at practice. And you hear this thing.
Who was there?
Yeah,
like four guys who wasn't everybody else, Grayson.
The best ability is availability. And that's a position that can be, again, bumps and bruises. They're kind of, out there, hamstring, foot, toe, whatever. I'm glad you brought that up, because you have guys who are obviously talented, Jalen Ellis, Gavin Holmes, etc., but we never see them, it seems like, consistently sustain any kind of success, even in practice.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Smoak, just to that point, you just brought up, Jalen Ellis and Gavin Holmes, two of the most injured guys that, we've seen, especially Gavin Holmes. He's had serious injuries. And so it's hard for me to sit here and go, man, that you can for sure rely on him for the entire season. Like, that's really hard to predict. And same with Jalen Ellis. It just seems like he's had so many nagging injuries. And then you look over and it's like Hal Presley's hurt. Devon Gibson's been hurt. I mean, you seriously are sitting there going, man, Armani Winfield, who's a true freshman, and Josh Cameron, who's a walk-on, might be the best receivers on this team right now. And I just don't know if you can go into the season, thinking that that's a great thing. And also, obviously, Monterey Baldwin as well. But he's not an outside receiver. He's more of a slot gadget type. It's just really interesting. And the more I look at it, the more I just feel like it makes sense for them to try to upgrade the room with more talent or more experience, one or the other.
Grayson, I think with wide receiver, because you look at, defensive back has a lot of questions, and a linebacker has a few, but not quite as many, especially with Doyle and Matt Jones coming back. But the secondary, it feels like they have enough guys that can maybe fill in if they were at least deficient. With wide receiver, we don't know what they can do, right? I mean, defensive back, you can probably fake it till you make it until somebody steps up. But wide receiver, we have no clue.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Paul. But I would also say that if you look at defensive back, like, you do have proven guys. You look at Al Walcott. I mean, he's far more proven than any wide receiver on the roster. Same with Christian Morgan as well. So, I mean, there's more guys that I feel comfortable with. Devin Neal is another one who's played plenty, just hasn't been the starter. So, Mark Milton, I mean, he's back. So, yeah, I think that, yes, you can kind of fake it till you make it, but I would also say they do have some returning guys. The problem is you're also trying to replace a guy like J.T. Woods, who, is very hard to replace. You need a young guy like a Devin Lemire or a Cisco Castan to come in and fill the shoes of J.T. Woods, who was just so tremendous last year. And then you also look at Kalen Barnes, who, yeah, he had some highs and lows, same with Raleigh Tejada, but they were still experienced guys. And so you got to figure out how to make up for that. But at least you have some familiar faces. At least you have some guys that have proven production and are a little bit older as well.
Those guys played games. They played in games. Tejada had 37 starts, and others, they always seemed like they were not always available, but they played a ton of games.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say, with Raleigh, I mean, to have a guy like that be in your second string was such a luxury for this team last year. So, yeah, I'd agree with that. They do have some guys who have played in big moments. Al Walcott, obviously, I'm expecting huge things from him. The more I watch him play, the more I think he could be an all-Big 12 guy. The more I look at the safety position, kind of what Christian Morgan could bring to the star position, if he does truly, lock in there, that could be really interesting. And I'm really curious about that field safety spot, because I've heard great things about Devin Lemire. He was a guy I was really high on in the secondary coming out of high school. And he's a little bit smaller, but my goodness, guys, this film is great. He can really get downhill in a hurry. Would probably be, honestly, which this is crazy, I think he'd be an upgrade in the run game from J.T. Woods. The problem is J.T. Woods' range deep downfield and the ability to force turnovers is something I don't know if Lemire can replace. But in the run game, my goodness, that guy, he can get downhill in a hurry. And so he's an interesting one. And same with Cisco Castan. I think he could be a really good player as well back there.
Grayson, any thoughts on JT Daniels in West Virginia?
Yeah, huge upgrade for West Virginia. I mean, Jared Dagey has just not been a very good quarterback for them for a long time. And I think, back when the big hiring session happened, Craig, you and I talked a lot about these coaches and the guys that we believed in. And both of us really like Neil Brown. And for some reason, it just hasn't come together for them. And I think in large part it's because they've not found a quarterback. And so maybe they strike gold here with JT Daniels. I still think, there might be a little more hype than production for him at this point. But I will say, I think it's going to be very hard for him to not be an upgrade over Jared Dagey. And I think it automatically pushes West Virginia probably into that middle tier, whereas I kind of thought they could have a really bad year this year if they didn't address the quarterback position.
Grayson, what do you miss the most about being a kid on Easter morning?
I mean, I will say growing up, my mom and dad really made it a big thing to, the Easter egg hunt. We'd go to church and all that, and that was obviously great as well. But, and being an only child and going to that and then doing the Easter egg hunt, they really made it an event because I didn't have a sibling to do it with. So it was like they just threw out so many eggs, and it was like, all right, go find them. And my cousins would come over as well. So it was really nice. And I think that combo of going to church, doing the Easter egg hunt, and then eating a fantastic meal, it doesn't get a whole lot better than that.
All right, well, have a great weekend, man. Thanks for your time. We appreciate you coming on a day early.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com. Recruiting week threads, what's going on that week, visitors on campus, whoever else. Baylor coaches after today are out until like next Tuesday. Today's their last practice until, of course, through the weekend. Craig, do you miss those pictures in front of the azalea bushes in the after church?
No. Haven't even thought about them at all till just now. Probably for the first time in 35 years. Probably.
When
No.
we got